I'm trying to figure out how to deal with it. At first, I'm trying to see if it has any weight. And one of the retorts that I'm seeing happen is if you criticize anything right now that is so let me frame this better. You have success in Trump winning the election. Yes, thumbs up for that. Absolutely. Let's go all the way.
I can't get my bubble to go.
Yeah, they're not. They haven't all set it up yet. I'll do it for both of us. Yeah, Trump won. Woo! All right. And he gets in, and we have in day one the reordering of all leadership. As soon as he gets in, I mean, just goes to work at the inauguration, after the inauguration, sometime a little bit before the inauguration, and just goes to work. I mean, dude is out there. Did you see where he's throwing pins out into the audience after he's signing executive orders? Dude, he's at the inauguration afterwards, and he's signing executive orders. They're like 15 or 20 or so. And he takes a bunch of pins to the people who are watching and just starts throwing them out there. And I'm like, is this a rock concert? What is this? And I wanted one of those pins. I'm not gonna lie. I would have been like, I would have fought somebody for it. But I thought it's very different than having a guy who has to have a makeshift studio that looks like the Oval Office for him to go and talk into because he's not very mobile. You don't see him talking to the press for an hour and a half. He did 90 minutes with the press while he's signing executive orders. Trump did. So we haven't seen this type of leadership in 4 years, and we've gotten very comfortable not having a leader. So he comes in, signs these executive orders, pushes back DEI, pushes back all the woke stuff inside him, tells the federal workers that they need to show up to the office, right? Like, it's been so bad that people haven't even been coming to work. I think it was 10% of federal employees didn't show to work. 38% of them were part-time in office and at home, which, let's be honest, they probably really weren't showing up at all, maybe on Friday to pick up the check or something like that. So we have a radical change in America. Really good direction. Very good direction. The next day, you get this prayer service that Trump attends. Now, granted, he didn't throw it. It wasn't his setup. Have you seen this?
No. I'm a little bit, man. There was like the lesbian priestess that was.
That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, is there more than that?
That was it. But no, it was an interfaith prayer service. You had Mormons there. You had everybody there. You had the Muslim dude now. I think people have posted like, okay, this isn't a church. I know what they mean by that. It's not a church, but it's a church. The building is a church building. We should have written Ichabod over it a long time ago. And you have a Muslim sitting up here. It is basically DEI. That's exactly what it is. And we just signed all these orders away for DEI. And here we have DEI here. And so I posted some stuff that I did. I was like, look, for whatever you want to say, this right here, this moment is like the children of Israel who just got done coming out of Egypt, and they set up an altar to the false gods. And they sit up there and say, this is the God that brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of God. This is not that God. This is not that God. And so I criticized the event. I was very happy to see that Trump and J.D. Vance seemed to be irked at some moments of the service, primarily when the false priestess got up and poked at him. But to show up to the event itself, an interfaith event, after knowing that whoever it was that they were praying to, that wasn't the God that stopped the bullet from hitting your center of your head, the side of your head, right? But this new kind of comeback from conservative people is don't poo-poo on the moment. And so there seems to be, if you have any criticism right now of what Trump does or is going to do or isn't doing necessarily perfectly, and you bring that up and you point it out, it seems to be you are raining on the success and the wins that we're having. And I'm a little taken back by that because I am completely on the team. I'm on board. I love the direction that we're going. And yet I know this isn't my movement. This isn't my movement. it is a gracious moment, a gracious movement that God has given us in this time, and I'm a part of it. I think we're helping with the wins in the sale, but I want one that when we get done having this type of success, that we call out to Jesus with a real church service, with a real prayer service, thanking God for his mercy and his grace, thanking Christ for saving us, rededicating our nation to Christ. That's the kind of service I want, right? So now I know if Kamala would have won, this would have been a completely different America. I get that. But it seems if you have any criticisms right now of some of the things that are going on, then you're unwise and you're poo-pooing on the moment, and shame on you. And the reason I don't like this is because I'm trying to figure out if I'm right about what is happening and that this is idolatry and we shouldn't be supporting it, or we just voted for all the DEI stuff to go away. We knew beforehand that this was going to be an interfaith service with all these people praying. And we knew that the Episcopal priestess, false priestess, was not a fan. You know what I mean? Like, Trump, you don't need to go to this. He could have came out and said, typically what we do is we go to a traditional prayer service. It's been tradition forever, but our administration refuses to allow people without the merit to hold the office to be able to try and hold it. We would refuse to allow any sort of DEI anywhere. And so we're going to have our own church service with Franklin Graham and the Christians leading the prayer services here at the White House. And we're going to televise that because we're not going to support the wokeness. I mean, okay, I would have loved that. But it seemed, so here's my point. If we are going to if we have our criticism and they're correct, somebody poked back at me and said, your timing was wrong. And my question is, when is it the right timing to talk about idolatry? Maybe in the moment? Or and you can jump in anywhere in here too. Or is it, tell me when it's okay for me then to say this was bad. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Tell me when. Because if my wife is acting like an adulterer and you're like, oh, they just had a good win, but she's back out there again, I'm going to give it a couple weeks before I let them know about it.
Yeah, no, that's ridiculous.
What? So something has, have you picked up on this at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think, they don't want any pricks of conscience about anything. They just want pure celebration, and that's what you do when you're rejoicing in your God.
Okay.
Right, and so, look, the Bible says to be ready to preach the word in season and out of season. Out of season is when it's not favorable. Right, like,
right.
It's golf season when it's nice outside. Right, it's like you got to be ready to golf in season and out of season. It's not very pleasant to golf out of season.
Out of season,
right?
And
so this need to go and speak the word out of season is that these are the John the Baptist moments. John the Baptist moments are when you have to speak the truth against the favor of the people, or against the favor of the rulers. And the other thing is, this argument is like, Saul defeats the Amalekites.
Come on now.
And when he defeats the Amalekites, we all need to be rejoicing in the great victory of our people over the Amalekites. And while he's there, God had commanded him to destroy all of the cattle and everything of the Amalekites and to kill their king. And Saul doesn't kill Agag and the king of the Amalekites after the victory, and he doesn't kill all the animals. And what we have is Samuel arrives, and when he meets Saul, he says, "Hey, you were commanded to kill all the animals. What's this lowing I hear? What are these animals?" And then there's also this idea of like, why haven't you killed the king? So what does Samuel do? He kills the king, and he kills the moment. And he also says, Saul says, "Look, we kept these animals alive because we're going to sacrifice them." And Samuel's response is, obedience is better than sacrifice. rebellion is like witchcraft.
But David, we haven't had any wins, and we finally have a win. Why don't we just focus on the winning right now and go in that momentum? And we'll get there. We will get to this point. But right now, this is just, it's not wise to have this conversation right now.
Yeah, delayed obedience is disobedience. Right? We promptly and sincerely, Lord, I hand my heart to you. Calvin's, was Calvin's motto.
No, you boomer. You're just a boomer. But here's something. Here's something though that and this is what I wanted to bring up with you. You didn't vote for Trump.
I did not.
No. And you still wouldn't vote for Trump.
No, he's not qualified. Exodus 18:21 lists out the qualifications of civil magistrates, and he doesn't meet them.
But right now, you're probably very grateful for all the things that he's doing.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of things. Not all the things, but a lot of the things.
Okay, let's start with the things that you like.
Yeah, I mean, you see the.
Let's do a poll. Let's just, hey, Corinth, you're being good. God's moving in you. Love what God is doing in your hearts right now. But
right.
Stop sleeping with your mother-in-law. Let's start with the good things real quick.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good stuff. For one thing, there was a hiring freeze that was immediately put into place. For another thing, there was a regulatory freeze that was immediately put into place.
Why is that good? Why is the hiring freeze good?
Hiring freeze is good because there's too many employees in the federal government, and we need to reduce them. The other thing is it's meant to avoid bureaucrats from hiring more enemies of the conservative effort, right? So the idea is you stop bad employees getting in while the new leadership is coming in. And with the new leadership coming in and the effort to reduce the size of government, there's going to be a removal of people who have weaponized the state against Christians, and there's going to be a putting in more people who are going to fit the classic, bureaucrat, or people who are more in line with trying to dismantle a lot of these administrations.
How could you not vote for that, David?
Yeah, so that particular thing, if it were a proposition,
I would have voted for.
I'd vote yes, hiring freeze, and in fact, I'd probably never vote to remove the hiring freeze. 40, 50 years from now, they're all dead. I'm just like, everything's fine. I don't know. What are we doing? None of these are departments that we need staff in. So
you like the hiring freeze. What else did you like?
Yeah. So let's say there was an executive order that I think there was the official. There's only two genders.
Did you see the other side? Did you see the other part of that they snuck in there with the only two genders?
The conception thing, right?
The definition of what a man is, and a man, the definition of a man, the chromosomes he has at conception.
Yes, that was great. Yeah, that was great. So that's amazing. So this getting into federal legal, documents, things that are starting to recognize humanity or humans being humans from conception. That's amazing. So you have that. There's man, I was going through I read all the executive orders yesterday, but I'm trying to remember.
You did? Okay.
Not the whole text of all of them. I read the summaries of each one. So there were a bunch of them that I thought were really good. And I'm just kind of drawing a blank a little bit right now. So forgive me.
No, they can find. I saw some of them on your X that you posted. Which, by the way, you should follow Real David Reece on X. Great stuff there. But so those some good things. Now, one of the things we've talked about before on Civic Covenanting that we've talked about probably numerous times you should go get on YouTube. There's a whole playlist for you to listen to. But you talked about the strong man, right? Right now, Trump is doing a lot of great things. There's some things that I'm a little concerned about because I think they'll open up the opportunity after he's gone, potentially, for people to move in the same way or merge the government and business. Gives me pause. But right now it's fantastic because it's in my favor. But do you think that what Trump is doing will lead to what you're concerned about with the strong man?
So it's difficult to tell for here. I think that directionally, yes. I'm concerned about the fact that basically we're also tired of the chaos.
Yes.
That we want somebody to come in and create the order.
Right? Yes.
And so efficiency of government is a dangerous idea. Now, we hear efficiency of government, you think of two things. You're like, oh, good, effective administration, avoiding waste and corruption and all that kind of stuff. But if government is designed by God, the civil government is designed to be inefficient. God establishes councils with grades of courts. He has it so that they're councils as opposed to individuals. You want efficient decision making, you just give power to individuals. You want inefficient decision making, you have deliberative bodies to discuss.
So did you just say that God has designed the government to be inefficient?
He has, right? So
really,
the process of the state think about the three areas. Right? Isaiah says God is your lawgiver, God is your king, God is your judge, right? So the three branches of government come from the Bible. They're listed out, and the division of the division of powers into those branches is an effort taking Presbyterian political theory and breaking that out. That's a part of the constitutional framework. And so this Peladiah Webster being a significant influence there. And so we have this idea of the state being broken into these different functions, and then we have things that are supposed to slow each other down and the checks on power that exist, right? So you go, unless there's a law that's in place by the legislature, you can't make a thing criminal. The executive is not allowed to execute laws except for laws that are on the books. All legislative powers are preserved in the legislature, and the executive has to do those laws. If he thinks the law is unjust or contrary to the Constitution, he is not to enforce it. So that's a check on the legislature. The executive has no power to execute judgments against people. There has to be judicial process. So you have a judicial branch that goes through a process that's due process, requiring that there be habeas corpus, that there be charges brought against a person in a timely manner, that it be on the basis of 2 or 3 sworn witnesses, that it be, you have all this stuff for the proceeding of things, and then the actual trial, and then you have this idea of what is the punishment that's going to be enforced, and the judge is going to evaluate, is the law just, was the process just, what's the just penalty here? And so you have all these checks, but that's all designed to be inefficient. It's way more efficient to have an absolute ruler, to have some Führer somewhere, some strong man that just says, here are the rules, I'm enforcing it, I'm going to judge people, and then you just got Judge Dredd in the streets and you go clean streets real fast, right? And so that whole process would be super efficient. It's just that it would be likely to be tyrannical, and you could see how if all you've got is just guys making the rules, executing the rules, making judgments, that is going to set things up for, if you have a perfectly moral person who is omnicompetent, maybe that goes real well. But outside of omnicompetent, perfectly just people, that's going to be problematic.
So, but everything that's happening right now, I mean, I'm sitting here rejoicing in pretty much 90% of it that I've seen at this point. I'm very happy because most of it seems like it's a rollback of the things that we've seen it put in place over the last 4 years, right? So Biden got in and did a bunch of crazy stuff. I mean, the country, it's amazing how fast the country could move in 4 years. And to be fair, what Trump has done in the last 2 or 3 days he has worked harder than Joe Biden has worked in his whole presidency.
Right.
There's no question about it. And all of the things that he's done, I think, has been for our good. Now, so I said earlier, this isn't my movement, but I'm a part of it, right?
By the way, the military orders, there were executive orders that were like, sending the troops to the
right,
regarding our border as opposed to being all over the place. There's all sorts of stuff like that. I forgot that left my mind before, but just, there's also all sorts of great stuff. Sorry, keep going.
So no, that's fine. Anything you want to do, just jump in here. We're just having a conversation. So there is a part where they are supposed to be efficient in some things, though. But you're saying there's a point where the paternal aspect of leading the people, they should be inefficient in. The governing of their responsibilities and duties given to them by God, they should be very efficient in, though, right?
So they should be very efficient in retrenching power.
Retrenching power.
Yeah. So when there's this, like, if there's evil that's being done by the state needs to be very efficient at going, whoop, pull this back. Right. There needs to be a very fast pulling back.
He's doing that. Yeah.
Of the wicked exercise of power. So Donald Trump is doing that. He's pulling back a lot of that. So President Trump is doing a lot of pulling back of the wickedness. So we should rejoice in his pulling back of lots of the wickedness.
Still not qualified?
Still not qualified.
Okay, all right. But he's doing a good job.
Well, think about this, right? One of the qualifications is the fear of the Lord.
Yeah.
If you fear the Lord,
You
would
wouldn't
you
have
be
showed up to the
comfortable?
interfaith service.
Exactly.
See, there I
Exactly.
go, just poo-pooing on the win again. I'm a boomer. I just poo-pooed on the win again. That just drives me nuts. And it's such a way to stop you to but is it, I was thinking about this. It seems after watching that interfaith service, Christians, and I've wanted us to be more political than we've ever been, but Christians now are becoming political without the Christianity because they want to win. And I was thinking, boy, we really need a healthy dose of the holiness of God again. Because if the holiness of God isn't driving our politics, it seems like all we want is just something better than that. Now, I do want something better than whatever Kamala was going to bring, whatever Biden's bringing, but I don't want something that's less than what God has desired for us to have, right? I don't want that. Right. So when I look back over, I'm trying to take the argument serious. And it seems that there are a lot of people who have been discouraged over the last 12 years about things. And there hasn't been a whole lot of wind in the sails about the success of America. Our military recruiting numbers have been super low because who would want to fight and die for a country that hates them? You can't get young men to engage. The identity, if you ask somebody right now, what is an American? Nobody really can give you a real definition of that. That they feel like matches the imagery of yesteryear, right? Like we don't know what American is. We don't have an inoculation process. We don't have an identity, and so there has been in the past a moment of trying to be perfect, and in the sense of trying to be perfect, we've missed out on the opportunities to have success, to push back. And a lot of the left has beaten us because we are searching or chasing after a form of perfectionism in politics that doesn't exist.
So that
I'm asking, like, if we would have followed your trajectory on this and not voted for, because I'm getting somewhere here, not voted for Trump, and we would have got Kamala, David, we would have had a completely different type of last 2 days, right?
Oh yeah, Kamala Harris would have been terrible, and so, it's just, when you see the Babylonians get conquered by the Persians, and you're like, well, I'm glad the Babylonians were conquered, and the Persians are, I don't know, maybe going to be better, maybe we're going to have Cyrus give a decree to rebuild the temple. It's like, and so it's the Lord turns the hearts of kings wherever he wishes, like channels of water, right? And it's he does what he wants with these things, but the consequentialism is not the Christian ethic. The Christian ethic is not, I'm going to seek to pragmatically manipulate situations to bring about the best outcome. That is the Jesuit ethic. And Jesuits, people talk about like Jews getting outlawed from a bunch of countries. You know who got outlawed from more countries than Jews? The Jesuits. Because the Jesuits would go around telling kings, hey, you should do this really evil thing because in this case, it's justified for the greater glory of God because blah, 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 blah. And so they would persuade people to do all sorts of horrific wickedness on the grounds that it was justified because of the consequences. So Jesuit casuistry, the Jesuit study of the particularities of cases to try to justify, in this case, this is okay, is famous. And so that idea of trying to make things okay because of the outcomes and to avoid problems, that makes it so that the law of God is of no effect. And,
go ahead. No, I want you to finish that.
And our duty is to say, I'm not going to lean on my own understanding, which doesn't mean I can't understand the Bible. I'm not going to lean on my own understanding means the Bible is clear and I understand it. But if I obey it, then I'm likely to get this bad outcome. And God says, test me in that. Test me. Don't test me by saying, I'm not going to obey God and I'm going to see what happens. Do test me by obeying me and seeing what happens. And so we're called to apply the law of God even when it seems inconvenient. And then we're supposed to see what God does.
There is a tendency to believe that because Trump won and he shares a lot of, oh man, there's so much rushing to my head right now. Let me go here first. My whole attitude towards this populist winning, I don't think we've ever had a real populist president in my lifetime. And maybe even, shoot, I can't think when can you think of the last time we've actually had a populist president? Look at you, lemonade. Wow.
It's some sort of fruit water. It's great.
Wow. You got some good servants over there. I don't have no. So I can't. Can you think of last time we had a real populist president? Like a real populist president.
So populism, if we define populism as something where you're trying to basically appeal to the economic interests of people with a sort of socialistic tendency, and then also trying to at the same time
just reframe the whole conversation. Why don't you go ahead?
Well, what's populism, right? So populism is supposed to be a social conservatism and an economic liberalism, right? That's not liberalism in the historic classical sense. I mean, like a classically stuff that is using the state to redistribute money to do stuff for the common man, right? And so that's just, and social conservatism is sort of just conserving the culture that exists. American conservatism has tended to be Protestant because of the fact that America has historically been Protestant. And so we associate conservatism with Protestant, the conserving of the Protestant and American constitutional order. But when you move towards populism, what you're doing is you're saying the acceptable social behaviors, that we're norming people around to what our culture finds normal. And we are also starting to use the state to redistribute money to people to support commonly. And that's the justification. The reality is you use the state to support your favorites, and then you say it's for the common man. And you see both sides do this, right? So the danger historically, the desire has been to limit the state's involvement into the economy and to limit the state's role into the culture, and to say it's going to punish crimes. That's the biblical limitation on it. And historically, America did that. And the problem with the American order is the failure to preserve Protestantism, because at the founding, we had the Constitution preventing the Congress from establishing a religion, but there were established religions in the states. Right. And so we were relying upon the states to do that with the expectation of a general Christianity, especially a Protestantism, and having that be at the state level. So losing all of that, what's the last time that we had a really a populist president? FDR was super populist. Yeah. Populist. LBJ was super populist.
I see what you're doing. What you're doing.
And so what we as we move forward, Reagan was sometimes called populist, but his goal was to limit the government's involvement in the economy. And so we get to, George W. Bush, he kind of tried to do the whole, like, we're going to do compassionate conservatism. We're going to use socialistic programs to move money towards the people that we want. But he tried to maintain sort of some of the elements of the elite in terms of like expectations about governance and like dignity about how things were done. But obviously he was a destroyer of national sovereignty and an internationalist in terms of sending out our power everywhere, right? So what we're talking about being populism right now is really just socialistic economics, and is a sort of social conservatism, and that is historically associated with fascism, right? Where you have a nationalistic, socialistic tendency. Now, I favor nations over internationalism, but the idea that we want to have the culture being kind of controlled by the state as opposed to just criminal punishments or having the economics of the society be shaped by the state as opposed to pulling the state out of those economic things. That's the problem. So I don't know. Sorry, I'm not sure what you really mean by populism other than that.
Just poo-pooed on everything.
The moment.
Wow.
Just
can we just have a victory here for a minute?
It's the moment. You're pooping on the moment.
Well, here's kind of what I mean by populist. And I think you're rightfully defining it, but I will say this. This might be kind of the failure of democracy too. We've all agreed populism comes around when we see something that needs to be destroyed, right? It's like we all seem to agree that that's not good, it's bad. We don't have a positive necessarily associated to what we want to do. We just all know what we don't need to be doing in the direction we don't need to be going. And the populist movement has come together not around a vision of what should be or what ought to be. Instead, they've come around, this group anyway, that I see, has come around what we can't have. We can't have people limiting free speech. We don't know what free speech really is yet. We can't have people not getting to where they need to go we can't have people getting to where, getting jobs, getting in positions that haven't earned the ability to be there. And instead we're giving them jobs because we need to meet a quota. We've all agreed that anything that doesn't have merit, that needs to go away. So the populist movement that I'm describing is a group of people who have come together to say, we know what the negatives are that need to be destroyed, that have been fighting us for the last 8, maybe 12 years, and we need to get rid of them. And this group has come together around that. And H1B was very clear that we didn't know what a direction we want. We talked about that last time, which I thought you did a fantastic job working through H1B. Everybody needs to go listen to that as the last 30 minutes of the last Civic covenanting from 2 weeks ago. Fantastic job on that. So what I'm defining populist is basically a group of people who've gotten together to say, this is what we need to demolish.
It's like the immune system of a society.
Right.
Response, right.
That's right. And so, David, part of me is, and this has kind of been my take on it. You tell me if I'm wrong on this. My take on this is like, let them go and destroy the things that we agreed to destroy. Let the wrecking team come in with the wrecking ball and just start tearing down, like Trump did in his first few days already, just all the stuff that needs to be gone. And I want to stand because, again, I'm in this movement, but it's not my movement necessarily yet. I hope to be at one point. I hope it does become a very, very Christian movement, which is why I'm a part of it. And it could be, I think revival could break out because of what we're seeing. When you start seeing certain idols being torn down, you start saying, oh, there's an opportunity to preach. Let's jump up and preach. Where in the last setup, there would have been no stage. There would have been no setup for you to come and walk up and start preaching. And people say, well, let's listen to him. I think there's been a turn in that. And I want to let them go ahead and take the wrecking ball to everything. And I want to sit on the back and say, not that. That's not what we agreed to destroy. We're not doing that one. No, that's the foundation of America. No, you don't have any business telling churches what to do. No, you don't have any business in business, right? Like, don't touch those things. No, you can't build this because we only said we're going to worry about what we're going to destroy. And just try and keep them in their lane of destruction and let them destroy the things that need to be destroyed. It's like, okay, these people are in one sense or another doing God's work for us. Let them destroy something. And then let's talk in about 3 years what it is we want to build and how to build and what building looks like. But it seems like right now is not a time of building as much as it is a time of destruction. Like, let the destruction happen. Let the high places fall. Am I wrong for thinking like that? Is that like not a good setup? Because it seems like, I feel like in one sense, I'm with the Philistines and they're destroying some of the enemies of God, and I'm going to let them just knock them all out.
No, I think that's totally right. I think the idea that we thank God for the idols that are getting destroyed, and we pray for God to destroy the other ones. And I think that then we do work to build up things in our own sphere and to continue to increase power. And for myself, a part of this is as there's all this stuff going on around us, the pretense that we can control it is laughable.
Mm,
right? Almost nothing I do is going to impact what the Trump administration does.
mm,
There's this,
mm,
and so sort of like the as you hear the news coming in, the good things you rejoice over and you praise God for. The bad stuff, you pray that God would put an end to it, and you continue to do your duty where you are. And as we look at this idea that we're trying to figure out how do we build up our power where it is, and it's just people understanding how to exercise power in their zone. And as you're watching what's happening around you, there's so much temptation to get caught up in it all the time, and to go to high things that are beyond our own station, and to just give all of our emotional attention to it and all of our focus there. And so this recognition that there are good things happening and we should thank God for them, and there are bad things happening, we should pray against them, and then building people up. And the most important thing for us to do locally is to interpret the world rightly and to talk to our friends about it rightly. And so, be the umpire, call the pitches, and when, if there's something bad that Trump does, call it bad. If there's something good that he does, call it good. And as you do that, you're reinforcing your own integrity, and you're shaping the worldview of the people around you. And so this ability to ruin the moment is really important, to help people to not be caught up in sentimental nonsense, because it's so easy to be carried away by mass hysteria, and it's easy to be carried away by the spirit of the age, and it's easy to be focused on man pleasing. And what we want to do is to help Christians to be concerned to please God, and to be ready to say no when a mob would bring them to do injustice. And so the only way you can fulfill the commands to not run with a crowd to do evil is to be ready to resist a crowd. And so you must practice that even when the crowd is people who you agree with on some things, because we don't get peer pressure from people who we hate and want to destroy. Right? When somebody feels like oh, they, them, whatever their thing is,
that's good.
you don't have to struggle with peer pressure there. When you have to struggle with peer pressure, and when you have to struggle with this mob mentality, is when it's the people you have affection for are ones pushing you to injustice.
So you said earlier that the position that we used to be in was a Protestant order, was a Protestant formulation, basically coming from Presbyterianism. We're not that anymore. That hasn't been in any president's mind in a very long time. We are running on fumes in that concept. For those of us who believe that and know that's the right place to be, what are the things that we need to be doing that, because this is a weird time. I agree with you that you said that nothing that you do is really going to have a massive effect on what Trump does and the presidency and stuff like that. I mean, I agree with that. And at the same time, I'm saying, man, the ability to have the mic in a way that we've never had before with social media actually does move a lot of the politics that's happening right now, for good or for worse. But it's given us a chance to speak pretty loudly and be heard from a small corner that we've never had before in American society. It's just been, when Elon Musk says you're the media now, he's not wrong about that. When H-1B happened, if there wasn't social media, that wouldn't even have been an issue. Nobody would have blinked twice. It would have been private conversations. But watching the MAGA group come up and have these conversations publicly put some massive halts on. Well, just look at the spending bill that didn't go through and got readjusted last year before the end of the year. That was all because of the uprising, mainly on social media, primarily X, that Massey was able to be heard in a way that he wasn't able to be heard before, because he had a large group of people retweeting and talking about and engaging and talking to their senators and representatives like never before. And so we kind of have the ability to work local, but also be very impactful on a national level that is very unique to our time.
Sure.
And so it's because we have that, not being silent on the things that we know are important, or poo-pooing on the moment, if you will. We really can do that in a way that can move the ball more Protestant, right? So how do we I want to think about, as a person who's a civic covenanter who looks at this moment and says, I didn't vote for Trump because I don't think he's qualified, and yet God has blessed us radically with Trump.
Yeah.
And now what I want to do is, as a person who holds to civic covenanting?
You want to be consistent. You don't want to blow with the wind. You want to figure out which things to say when, what's the thing to emphasize at what time. But it's about being consistent, and it's about speaking the truth in season and out of season, right? It's about,
yeah.
And so when it's knowing who you're trying to influence when, because there are times when there's attention from the rulers on a thing, and yes, you can lend your voice to try to get them to not do something evil, or to support something good. And there's other times when the rulers act, and when they've acted and they get the applause of people that you would frequently see fighting on your own side, and you go, no, this is wickedness. And when you see wickedness being done, and it's done by the rulers and it's applauded by the mob, it's your job to be a voice against it. And so often that there's this reaction of like, why are you ruining the moment? Why are you attacking our side? Why are you attacking our guy? It's like, because my guy is God. Right? Like, so that duty to say it's not about the team, it's about God. And that people want to say that's like some sort of piety. That's some sort of pietism. It's not pietism, it's piety. And it's when you behave by your duty and externally act, the external action and going into the public sphere with that external action is the opposite of pietism. Pietism tries to leave piety in the home and for the individual, and maybe in the church to some extent, but to separate that all out from the civil society and from the general broader culture. And the goal is to speak the truth and to be a witness there, and to deal with the fact that it will bring displeasure. And we have to speak boldly into that, even if it brings displeasure from people who we would prefer a positive opinion from.
But David, you're and this is my pushback that I'm thinking of. I can hear somebody saying you're ensuring that you will never have power in that way, like, because there's a form of perfectionism that you're expecting to get, that is not going to happen. Life just doesn't work that way. And so in acting that way, you're ensuring that you will never actually have power, which kind of goes to one of the other questions I was going to have. Well, if let's just assume that's the case. What does somebody who is a civic covenanter do when they don't have power? Because I think there's an assumption too, that to think that you actually do have power right now when you really don't. You don't. Yeah. I think that's a pretense. Like you don't have power when your principles aren't the thing that's primarily leading the narrative, right? So, but what does a civic covenanter do when they don't have power, right? Like that's, and it seems like, being a Presbyterian, I've watched Presbyterians get left in the dirt as far as numbers as it relates to churches and attendance, because either certain movements have risen up, like, seeker sensitive movement, and their churches grow by thousands. Mega churches came in, people started attending those, and they can have massive effects on voting. They can have massive effects on culture and society. And you got this little church over there with 20 people, 30 people. And it's like, well, you don't have any power by the way you're acting.
Yeah, no, I think there are two things to be considered with the law of God. One is that there are positive duties to put on, and there's negative duties to put off. And so often when people are like, oh, let's go do this thing, and you go, no, and they go, that's just, you just no to everything. You just no to everything. And if we're not going to do anything, you're not going to have any power. And it's just like, well, first of all, the no's are in order to do the right yeses. And And so then you give the yeses and you get the response is boomer, right? It's like, oh, grind harder, do whatever. It's like, no, like, look, you work in moderation.
Or you're allergic to winning.
Yes, you work in moderation, and you build, and you trust God to bless the work. You sleep and you trust God to bless the sleep. You rejoice and you trust God to bless the rejoicing. And there's this gradual building, healthy growth, the increase of things, and you find others to unify with. And that process of growing and gathering and growing and gathering is the process by which Christ perfects and matures and gathers the church. And that's true not just in the church, but that's true of Christians in terms of the civil sphere, the way that the power of Christ manifests itself in the civil sphere. So consistency. God then manipulates the mob to do what he will. He causes kings and he causes the mob and he causes the stuff around us to go to bring stuff about. When we're faithful and we do what God commands and we focus on the thing God commands us to focus on, we then get to enjoy the show. We get to enjoy the fact that God then manipulates the things around us to bring about blessing. And so rather than trying to manipulate everything by means we make up, we trust God by applying his law. Now, this idea of do you have power or not? You have power over yourself. You have power to some extent over your household. And then the more local things, you have more and more power. And there's just like influencing broadly, but we can't control everything. Even kings can't. Like the conceit that we can control everything is absurd. And that our influence is very much. We are so limited in what we can do. And what we need to be are reliable forces that are people know what we're going to do because they know the law of God. Mm-hmm. And that makes it seem like we're easily able to be controlled. And the point is that God's strength is displayed in that. When we are just trying to plod along, doing the stuff that God commands, and then God makes ridiculous things happen around it. I remember there's some cartoon where you got I think it's the Mr. Magoo series. You got like a blind guy walking around and crazy stuff is happening around him, and it's like he narrowly avoids death over and over again. He has no idea what's going on because he's kind of just blindly walking through it all. It's sort of like that, except as opposed to just getting through it, it's like on the way to prospering. The church has, bullets whizzing by and, axes that fall and almost hit you. And all at the same time, they instead of hitting us, they hit our enemies. And, it's sort of this we're moving through and God just makes things happen around us. And we just do our duty and plod along. And then there are decisive moments where we have to act, where God gives us strength to kill Goliath or to overcome the enemy army or whatever. And those things, yes, we use our power to do our duty, but we know when to do it because the law of God teaches us to do it. And this, you can go, well, that seems, you're just leaving it all to kind of other people to do. No, we're doing our duty along the way, and we have to try to not use the arm of the flesh to go do a bunch of things or approve a bunch of things that God has not commanded. And if that's not, if you go, that's not exciting, it's not enjoyable.
Or just be silent. Or just be silent about it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I refuse. I refuse to be. I mean, I thought it was a great win that they put in conception. A man is defined by a man when he's at the level of conception, because that was a win. It was such a great subversive move. Most of the time, liberals are the only ones who think like that, right? We haven't had any laws change in America, but what they decided to do was say, this is how we look at things, right? And so I thought it was a great move. It was a good move for us. But when we see things that aren't pro-life, I'm not going to be quiet when I see something that's not a pro-life thing. It's like, wait, that's going to kill more. No, I don't want that. I've tried to limit, because of the populist movement, I've tried to limit my focus primarily on, and you might hate this, but I've tried to limit my focus primarily to the free market. And this is why. Let me explain myself before you cut. It's not that I don't care about righteousness and everything else that the federal government is doing, or that the government is doing, or the civil magistrate is doing, but I've realized that if you don't have power, the way that we would like to, especially as a civic covenanter. The thing that you can fight for that I think gets people around a central agreement is free markets. And it's kind of a subversive move because free markets are Christian. They're not neutral. It is an absolute Christian thing in the same way that marriage is. I think we talked a little bit about that before, where marriage is Christian. It's not a neutral union that just happens to be floating out there in mid-space that somebody came up with. No, it's Christian, certified by God, right? That's bottom line. I think free markets are the same way. And so there is a subversive move to say, okay, for me anyway, I want to focus on making sure the federal government removes regulations for people to function in a free market and for free markets to be able to trade and sell and to build without having to be overtaxed, whether through tariffs or through local tax or anything like that, and let us operate. Because I think in those kind of situations, that's the wind in the sail of somebody who understands the law of God and civic covenanting very well. Because a self-governed person who seeks to create goods and services for his neighbor, for his family, and the overflow for his neighbor, and not have it hindered by fascism, all of a sudden he becomes a powerhouse that is unstoppable. And Christians who are Protestant and have that work ethic, that's where the Protestantism is dormant right now. Right. And if we want to rebuild the America that we once had that was Protestant, our work ethic that's very, very Christian is going to have to be the primary thing that we use in order to regain a public public visualization of power. Our businesses, the way that we love each other, the way that we interact with each other civilly, that's the main thing for me. And I'm seeing that more and more. And one of the areas that Christians are really, really poor at is free market economics, right? We don't work hard anymore. We don't build institutions anymore. We've built institutions and we left them, and now the world owns them, and there's no Protestantism in them whatsoever. And so I'm really like, okay, just clear out everything, let the markets be free, because the power for us comes in that self-governing. The more we're able to self-govern, the more we're able to worship freely and build and sell, all of a sudden, the market creates for us opportunities to move and control and to be in power that you don't have to have the civil magistrate involved in most of those things. And they can control whole cities. I mean, look at Texas right now. For whatever reason, California has become a tyrannical place. We know why. But Texas is getting all sorts of massive businesses coming there because it's allowing business to work freely, not be drained by DEI and woke culture. And so you're able to have guys who own and govern their business say, no, you have to show up in the office. No, I can fire you if you don't work hard, right? You have all these things where the government isn't limiting businesses to be able to be profitable, and it's not overtaxing them. And so you have wealth growing up there. And so for me, I'm looking at that and like, man, if we want to really gain power, governing ourselves with our families and out through our businesses right now over the next 2 years to build something. I mean, we are so late on this. The government is building potentially a $500 billion Stargate. It's $500 billion of outside investment in Texas to build the largest AI farm that exists, right? $500 billion. And I'm like, these guys are going to be able to do whatever they want to do, right? And they get, when you can do that, you get to tell the government no on some things, right? Like you get to say, no, we're not going to do that. Sorry, right? Like that's huge. But we're not building those kind of things where we have that kind of liberty to operate because we don't own it. And so I'm like, look, let the market be free. Let a bunch of little micro businesses that do $5, $20, $50 million a year, let them come in that are Christian. And all of a sudden you have some real power there to operate. And so I'm really focusing on getting a good economic understanding, letting Trump tear down anything that has, red tape legislation, any sort of overtaxing. I don't like the tariffs thing. That's one of the things I think we need to push back on, because that's a place for us over the next 20 years to really dominate and have real power. It's like you don't get power. I don't think you get power by just voting. That's not how you get power by what it is you own. You get power by how it is you serve people well. Like we forget that that's how the world is actually made. You get power by going to die for other people, right? That's how you get it. You go out there, you find a product, you labor to do it, you give your life for it because it's valuable to other people, and then you trade with them on it, and they're thankful for you because you establish a way for them to produce other goods and services as well. And that's where we get power at. And having that kind of power, then it doesn't matter what administration comes in. Here's what, when the next COVID happens or whatever happens, here's what we're not going to do. My company, my people, this is how we operate. And we set the tone, and we can say, go kick rocks. And then when we become the governors of our own companies, our own institutions that serve other people, and those people then flourish underneath us. And we keep building like that. So I'm really after okay, I want to get involved in all the other stuff. But if we can just in this moment primarily get the markets back to being as free as possible and let us work and put that Protestant work ethic into action, we can see some real power over the next 10, 20 years, and Protestantism come back alive in America that it's never been before.
Yeah, I think what you pointed out there, the power comes from service, and power comes from that creating work and the ownership of the things. Absolutely. The way that you can impact people's lives. And what's so frustrating is, you can almost turn that into oh yeah, that's very local, it's very whatever. And then you can turn that into a thing that also becomes an excuse of well, all the business owners I know should be doing this better or whatever. It's no, if you're not a business owner, the way you apply what you just said is to serve exceptionally well. And that's how you increase in what you are able to bring home. That's how you build loyalty. You have to work to gain the loyalty of a person who has resources, and you have to serve them well to where they trust you and where they give you more resources. And that process, and you can influence in that, because even if you're under somebody else's authority, if you serve well, you look at Joseph rising as a slave. You look at Daniel in Babylon becoming prime minister, or Mordecai becoming prime minister of Persia, right? Or you have all of these people that are examples to us that they serve competently, and then they are also clear about the law of God, refusing to compromise. Daniel refused to eat the meat that was sacrificed to idols, and refused to participate, and asked to just eat the vegetables. Right? He picked small things to pick fights on, to apply the law of God.
Yeah.
And so this idea, I remember being an employee and holding to the Sabbath conviction and going, I will work really hard and I will do what needs to be done to make sure that I'm serving really, really well. And I'm going to not work on the Sabbath unless it's a work of necessity or mercy. And that idea of being an application to show conviction, even though it undermined in short term the favor of people, in the long term, it was an indicator that I was trustworthy, because I was willing to do something that was obviously going to lose favor in the short term with somebody, and at the same time was a matter of conviction, which made them believe, okay, you're just not going to do stuff that's just convenient for you. You're going to do things based upon principles, which makes it easier to hand you power. And so this gaining of resources, even inside of other people's institutions, where you can apply the law of God, and the more you manage, typically the more you make, right? So you start to have the property coming into your control. And so this work of developing stuff that you own and of rising in institutions, other people's companies or whatever, is the thing. So then you have enough that you can go put capital into starting your own business or buying a business. And those are steps to make it so you get that ownership piece. But it is so difficult to find people who are willing to work and to build long-term alliances. It's you, even amongst Christians. I was having a conversation just the other day with several pastors who are theonomic and postmillennial, And they disagreed with the idea of discipling your employees. They disagreed with the idea of trying to teach the scripture or use a catechism or anything like that inside of a business, and they viewed it as a imposition against the pastoral authority of other people. And so this Puritan view of the household is so key that, like, we don't have power because we think that making money is icky because we've removed all Christianity from it, as opposed to saying we should make money so we can do things with that money and impose the law word of God on all the stuff that we own. We start to think making money is a way of making money to hand it to pastors, or making money is a way of trying to make it so you've just got more money that you can consume or whatever, as opposed to it's ways I can enact power step by step, where I am going to control the system in terms of the policies that we make, and have the rules be that, and make it so that instead of DEI classes, we have classes where here's how we're applying the law of God to our business. Right? It's very different.
Isn't money and making lots of money evident that you are serving people well?
Absolutely. It's exactly right. If people pay you to do a thing, that's the best evidence we can have that they think what you're doing is worth something.
That's loving your neighbor.
Exactly. And if you can do it profitably, that means you're doing it efficiently. You're
right.
giving them value at a higher rate than it's costing or consuming value. And so your view here that the free market is a way of defending our ability to exercise Christian power is exactly right. Because the free market is essentially saying, I have the power to do with my property what I will, which is what we're taught in the scriptures is the principle. And the only limiters are the law of God, and the state is only supposed to punish the criminal things that people do, not any sin, right? You don't go around going, were you thinking about that, right? And so this idea of defending your sphere of power and saying, I have this zone where I can act with property and I can use it to glorify God. The state is supposed to defend that. And so this ability to glorify God, we have to be able to do things where we exercise power in our local zone and to honor the Lord with it. And so I think, William Perkins has a little book on the Christian household, or it's like a koinonia is another way that it's referred to. It's the law of the house. And then also William Gouge wrote 3 volumes on the household. Does a magnificent job talking about, the master of the estate, the husband and wife, and then also the idea of parents and children. And so there's 3 different roles. Gouge's 3 volumes is he goes on long and he has a lot of stuff about the theology and how it connects. But Perkins' little book is like 30, certainly less than 60 pages. And the best place you can get it is, and there's this like work of William Perkins. You can also find it online for free. But the Perkins one, like everybody should read the Perkins one because it's so short. The Gouge one, if you like what Perkins has to say, you should go read Gouge because then you'll just get it fleshed out. But Perkins was kind of the granddad of the Puritans, and Gouge was alive during the Westminster Assembly. So we're looking at like an Elizabethan era Puritan who had studied in Geneva and then came to England, versus somebody who's a couple generations down the line writing during the Puritan flourishing.
So I think there's a tendency to forget the both and process. People usually pick either or when it comes to solving problems. And I've seen a lot of people pick, so I look at, I said that to say this, there is when you look at the fentanyl that's coming through the border, you look at our young people who aren't, I was just watching Tucker Carlson talk to the mayor of New York, Adams. And, he's like, most of our high school kids are coming to school high. Marijuana is rampant on the street in New York. They said you can't walk down there without smelling it everywhere. Homelessness is absolutely rampant. And our young people just aren't getting educations. And he was complaining because he's like, because of the illegal immigration, we have spent billions of dollars in all $6 to $7 billion all over the place trying to manage them in the same way you would manage a full-grown adult in their lifestyle. He's like, we're just burning money. And so we're drying out our coffers. And And he's like, I don't have $200 million to give to trying to find where these young kids are who aren't coming to school and create programs to help them get in to school. And I'm listening to this and I'm like, wow, that's horrible. That's horrible. But that isn't a problem that the government can fix. And there is an amount of money that we can throw at this that is going to solve that problem. And apart from the power to solve that problem really is in the home, right? It really is in the church. Like I don't want to miss out on the ability and the effectiveness of other governments functioning to save and bring America back to its Protestant roots, right? Like parents who are raising their kids to fear the Lord, giving them a godly Christian education, not one that comes from the state, train their people up in such a way, and those people have an effect on other people that even if you didn't stop all the fentanyl coming in, you take all the oxygen out of the room so that fire dies, right? Now, I want laws that stop illegal immigration. I do. I want law because we have drugs coming in the society. All sorts of things are happening there. But there's another way to fight that battle where we are not the kind of people who want fentanyl. We are not the kind of people who want drugs. We're not the kind of people who don't have our kids who are respectable. We're not the kind of people who have marijuana all over the streets and violence in the streets, because we have fathers and we have mothers and we have families who pray together, who sing the Psalms together. And those families that are not intact, who have brokenness, we have other families that come alongside them, and we have the church along with them that's functioning and able to come to society and say, I remember my mom. I mean, growing up in Minneapolis, these aren't problems that we didn't have. We had these problems. But I remember a group of old folks, those boomers, who used to go on the corner to drug dealers and say, baby, does your mama know you out here? Does your daddy know you? What are you doing out here? I ain't got no mama. I'm just trying to make it. And I remember Sharon's grandmother, come on, I got work for you to do. And she would drive up to the corner and say, it was so subversive. Are there any strong men out here? Is there any men out here? Just drive up on her Cadillac and pull up to them, knowing they're selling drugs. They come up to the window thinking they're about to get a drug sale. And she's like, is there anybody out here who's strong, who's got some muscles? I need somebody with some muscles. And she used to bait those guys into coming and cleaning out her garage. And she had drug dealers coming out to her garage, cleaning out her garage, and she would feed them food and preach on them while she's feeding them food. And those guys, before long, were coming to the church and not on the corners, and got jobs, got married, had kids in the corners. My mom would go walk around the corner, and she said, you better not be out here when I come back, because I'm going to be praying for you. I'm going to come out here and mess up your whole drug deal. I'm going to come and pray for you right here on the streets. And I used to watch, and we would just go down our streets and evangelize and talk to these guys. And some of them just hadn't been loved. They had just not been. That's not something that you're going to get from a government. That's going to come from your community. And so I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, this whole populist movement, everything that's going on, it's going the right direction. But if they don't have a culture to anchor them, if they don't have Christianity as their anchor, if they don't have families, strong families as their anchor, this thing is going to be in the wind. And so I'm looking and I'm like, whatever Trump has done, he's opened up this moment for us to create a strong Christian culture to be the anchor of this movement that can transform America in the next 20 years. And it's from simple things like that. That's not, nobody even knows what my grandmother was doing. That wasn't something that made the news, but it was something that changed our community.
And it will be preached from the housetops.
Right.
Lord Jesus Christ will bring it to remembrance in the day of judgment.
Yes.
And he will reward her, right, richly for those things, those good works done in faith.
Yes.
What you're saying right here, right, the fear of the strong man is, if we don't build up local power, if we don't build up the power of our homes and the power of us as individuals to govern ourselves and the power of the local church, then there's going to be a power vacuum and there will be chaos, and we're going to scream for a strong man. And so I think that the direction that's going to go in this country for a long time is going to be set across the next, I think, 10 years or so. I think we're in this window period, and we've got even this 4 years of the Trump presidency is probably breathing room where we can let roots go down deep. And it's this ability to build now. May God give us lower taxes. May God, give us a reprieve from some of these things. May there be a destruction of a lot of criminality and, guarding of the borders and all these sorts of things, right? So may all that happen and reduce certain things and give us breathing room. And so the place for the roots to go down, for us to build strength, and having that strength to be able to have our neighborhoods be cared for. You talk about this whole thing with New York, with all these people and all these huge institutions. These things will go bankrupt. These cities, these socialist cities, they will go bankrupt. They will strangle their own people. They will lose power. The flight from California is an example of it. And as people start to flee, these tyrants start to try to do more and more to try to take possession of you, because they go, you can't flee. You're our property. You're our tax farm. You can't leave, right? And so these efforts to strangle, as people go, oh, the tyranny is too thick. I need to get away. The tyrant's response is to go, no, you're going to stay here. You're going to be ours. And so this danger of increasing tyranny creates increasing conflict between the different zones of power. And for us, we have to build our power where we are and be more capable of supporting other people and discipling them. Because when you have economic power, you get to set the rules. The rich rule over the poor. That's what it says in Proverbs. How is that? Because they're the ones that hire the poor. And so as a result, they control what they do with their time. And then they also set the rules, they set the tasks, and they have opportunity to disciple. And so that power to draw people in, to disciple, you can do that for wicked reasons, to reorganize society around the image that Satan would have you, or you can do it righteously and service and do it as Christ would have you. So that's the thing. We cannot say enough about the need to build locally, and that looks like the household being built up. And then it looks like encouraging unity and relationship in the church and trying to encourage churches to interact. And so there's a pressure of the constituency of local churches that I want to encourage, that there's an expectation that there's going to be an effort to interact with other churches of like faith and practice, and not just to gloss over the differences, but to work through the differences to come to agreement. And that's really hard.
Yeah.
What's really hard is taking time to talk to each other, to work through disagreement. And I have found it's extremely hard to get any pastors to take the time to do that. And so
do people really work through their disagreements, or do they just find out they have more disagreements and then they never come to any kind of conclusion?
I think that both can happen. I think that there's a way that God commands us to go through things. And the way we go through things is we go to the foundations, which is the word of God, and we go from there to build. If you build on sand, everything's going to fall apart. If you build on the stone, you can build and it lasts. And the way that there's lasting building is when there's unity. And so I think you look around and you go, oh, look, all this division that exists in the world. I think there's more people agreeing about more doctrine in the Christian world today than almost any other time in history. We might be a little bit lower than some other high water markers, but the population in general is growing, and the number of people who understand and believe truth is increasing. And what's going to happen is unbelieving elements of the population will be destroyed in various ways or be converted. And those things are going to happen because of things like disasters and wars and all this kind of stuff, and because they won't reproduce, right? Like the unbelieving world doesn't have children because of the fact that life is meaningless. And without the Christian God, you end up just hedonically chasing stuff, and children become an inconvenience for your maximizing of pleasure. And so they're destroying themselves. They're not having children. So they multiply by stealing our children, right? So the way that we can get unity is by going back and saying, okay, what are the most basic things we agree about? Great. We agree about the word of God being the scriptures. Okay, great. Who is God? Let's talk through that. Okay, where do we get that from? Do we get it by looking at like the Seventh Ecumenical Council, or do we go and say, let's look at what Scripture says here. And then you look at the history of the church and say, what has been said, which of this accords with Scripture? We judge it all according to Scripture. We go, great. Okay, now let's go to our anthropology. Do we agree about man? Hey, let's look at the law of God. Do we agree about how we know good and evil? And so you systematically go through these things and you seek to discuss them, and you use confessional documents. If you want to destroy unity, you always talk about the hot button issues, and you never go down and talk about these more basic things. If you want to destroy unity, you try to only point out differences and never acknowledge agreements. If you want to destroy unity, your goal is to maximize pointing out the worst possible ways of interpreting the other guy, as opposed to trying to understand what they mean and to see if there's agreement. If you want to destroy unity, what you do is you demand conformity with a precise way of wording things, even if it's not a confessional agreement, but you just demand that people say things exactly your way, rather than trying to understand whether you agree or not, depending on whether, even if you have different forms of words. And so this like wrangling over words to demand precise agreement about how you say the thing, as opposed to trying to understand if you agree, is a way to do that. So destroying unity, we need to identify things that people do that destroy unity, so we can identify who are the people that are intentionally trying to destroy the church and weaken its power in order to carve out a fiefdom, and who are the people that want to talk through things on a deep level to seek to understand each other and to work through things without pretending like there's agreement where there's not. And that's hard. And so that process, I believe we've got to figure out in a Christian way how to use social media and how to use media broadly to not propagandize, but to encourage a more intellectual engagement from the church. And I think a lot of people are waking up and becoming hungry for that, which is why long form podcasting and stuff like that is increasing in popularity, because people are going, I'm so tired of just taking in the junk food. And they want meaning. And so we're seeing so much long form content be consumed. But what's happened is people started to recognize people want that. And so now a lot of the long form content is still kind of junk. And so figuring out how to have long form content actually be an engagement on serious ideas, and to seek to actually resolve disagreements or to acknowledge where there's actual agreement. And that's the work. And so we all kind of get tired because that's hard. It takes mental energy and time. And so you kind of get tired to go, let's just go work. And so there's this like, should we come to a unity or should we just go work? It's like both. We have to spend time on both. And so the commitment has to be to do work and with people who have a certain level of agreement, and then to seek to increase that agreement by gradual discussion. And if we don't do that, then there's not going to be increased unity. It will only be the constant, well, is this person close enough that we can let them in? Is this person? And then you just expand the tent until the thing becomes a den of apostasy, which pushes out the people with the most conviction. So there's got to be a both. It has to be not all work and not all just talking about unity. It has to be, let's work together, get stuff done, and let's work through increasing unity, and a commitment to do that. And that's what civil covenanting provides, a place where you've sworn to work together, and you've also sworn to seek to work through disagreements over time. And that idea of working through the disagreements, it is so crazy how hard it is to get people to say, yes, let's talk and seek to work together. It's like they don't believe that in John 17, the Lord Jesus Christ prayed that his church would be one as he and his Father were one before Christ came as an incarnation. Now, that doesn't mean essential unity. We all have essential unity already. We're humans. You and I have the same nature. We're human beings. The point is that even though we are individual persons with minds, that we agree about truths. And so the unity that Christ prays for, that would be like the unity of God the Son and God the Father, is an intellectual unity, that we would agree about the truth. And if we believe that Jesus Christ is the righteous man and that the prayers of the righteous are of much effect, then we should believe that prayer will be answered. And we should do the work of that. And there are three things that increase the power of the church to see the world transformed and brought to obedience to the Lord Jesus Christ. One is clarity about the truth, preaching the truth. Two is our unified witness, which can't be pretended. It has to be real. And 3 is love, obedience to the law. Those 3 things make us so that our witness is powerful. When we speak the truth clearly, when we are in agreement about it, so there's multiple voices crying out and calling people to obey and to submit to the Lord Jesus Christ and to believe all that he has said. And when we apply the law, it makes our profession credible so that people believe it and go, these guys mean it. And so that idea of the truth being spoken clearly in unity, in love, that's how the world is conquered and overcome by the church.
So you said earlier that we have to pick the small fights with where we are currently in America right now. Over the next 2 years, what are those small fights that you intend to pick?
I have actually had to realize that I am overly ambitious. And my battle is always to say, I need to focus on, I need to focus on pulling back. So this retrenching of effort, but there's also then you build up resources and you try things, right? So you have to go back and forth between strive to gain and then, okay, here's a victory, great. You keep going. Okay, I'm overextending myself. I've got to pull back. So you got to do this. You have to constantly be evaluating, do I press on or do I regroup? And so for me, I have been striving really hard for about a decade to build. And I realized a lot of people who love me have been saying, you can still build, but you need to let the roots get deeper.
Develop.
And so slowing down a little bit to develop people around me and to help them to prepare for things. So for across the next year, maybe 2, it's sort of there's some acquisitions, there's evangelizing, there's hospitality, but caring for that. And my children, some of them are getting older to the point where they're not going to be in my home all that long. One of my sons has been married, and I've got a granddaughter. But
you're a granddaddy.
I know, it's amazing. Being a grandparent's way better, by the way. So it's the reward on top of the reward.
Yeah.
But this idea that you've got to, that I have to, where I am right now, I have to help to develop my people and nurture and water and to let the roots settle in. And in a year or 2, maybe go back to a striving, for growth mode. And there's still growth in that time. That's the thing that's difficult is it's not about not growing. It's about how fast are you growing versus how much are you focusing on settling. And everybody has to evaluate, am I in a place where I've got a bunch of stuff I'm governing that I need to govern better? Or am I in a place where things are going well and I need to use those resources to expand? Right? So fixing or helping to nurture versus expanding. The pioneering versus the cultivating. The getting new ground versus the maintaining and improving. And that's sort of the thing that people need to evaluate. And I think across the next 4 years, we should all have time to go through 1, 2, maybe 3 cycles of reversing back and forth between those. But so for me, it's giving some time to let things mature. And then it's further from there, then preparing to go on another advance and to do more. And so my intention right now is to sort of focus on what I've got going on and be cutting what I'm doing and really focusing on doing better, fewer things.
That's really interesting. It's talking about picking fights. One of the things you did do was like, let me tell you what I'm gonna do about this administration, or let me tell you what I'm gonna do about politics, or you pick something that was like, here's where I know I have the ability to function and have full control over. And this is what I know within my sphere to reach, I can actually engage with and have real change. And I'm sure that's not to say not to be engaged outside, but that gives you the ability to have real power outside is because you have strength within, right? Like that's, the deeper we are, the higher we can build. Like that's, yes. I think we got to remember that. And some people are building high, but they don't have any depth, and that just blows over. And it can be good for a moment, but it doesn't have any longevity.